Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last day of our class. Now, obviously, it's not the last day for you guys because you have Foundations Honors 3 coming up in the fall. But it's the last day for us, and so we're going to wrap up with one of the more difficult conversations we're going to have. Um, but I think it's a fairly important place to leave this because we've just been talking about sort of all these things that come with the Enlightenment and how great they are. And we want to talk about this a little bit and how we might picture this. So the opening picture here, this picture right up here, is Guernica, and it's from a person named Pablo Picasso. Guernica was this town in Spain. This is right before World War II, and not a lot of people know that the Nazis went into Spain in World War II to support the fascists who were fighting there, Francisco Franco, and this is sort of right before World War II, and the Nazi use of force in Spain before World War II was sort of like a prelude, almost like a test run for the tactics, for the style of fighting, for the troops, and for the things like tanks and planes and things like that. One of the things that happened is there was this town called Guernica that the Germans bombed just to oblivion on behalf of the fascists in Spain. And this is a painting that comes out of that, again, Guernica. It's definitely Picasso's style. It's definitely modernism. We're not going to talk about modernism or anything like that, but this is just sort of, again, a pictorial version of the horrors of not just World War II, but sort of the horrors of the 20th century. That yes, you get all these great things with progress, and we saw that when you saw that Pinker TED Talk from a couple weeks ago. And just, as many of you guys said in your discussion, you were talking about, the progress thing. We tend to focus on the negatives, but man, there's a lot of positives that come out of it. And especially like when we're quarantined from the coronavirus, there's this thought that, whatever's going to happen, we know that in a year or two, science is going to, scientists are going to use their reason and come up with a vaccine. So while it kind of sucks right now, we know there's a happy ending at the end. And that's sort of how we think about a lot of these things is, oh, yes, there's, this tragedy, there's this tragedy, but human beings will figure it out and reason will prevail and we will get to the other side and everything will be fine again. And that's kind of Enlightenment thinking. That's kind of how we do think about this. What we don't often think about is how much the Enlightenment and that reason will prevail idea has also created some other ways of thinking about things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so first thing we're going to do is we're just going to review very quickly what Enlightenment is. And Enlightenment is essentially, if you need to, go back and look at your past notes and look at Kant and all that. But it's essentially this idea of reason and progress. So we have this disenchantment of the world. We did it. We've overcome superstition. No more myth, no more superstition. Now the only thing that is real, true, and maybe a better way to say that is it's not that's real and true. The only thing that we know we can know is stuff we can know. I know that sounds weird, but there's just stuff we can't know. For example, does God exist? I got right now, you can't see me right now, but right now my hands up in the air like maybe not. I can demonstrate that if I pour water on grass will grow. That's science. I can do tests on this. We can do all that kind of stuff. Reason says grass needs water. What does reason say about God existing? Again, don't really know. That doesn't mean it's not true or not. It doesn't mean it's true or not true. It just means we can't say anything about it because reason is the thing that's going to tell us about this stuff. Now, obviously, in the Enlightenment that we were talking about, the assumption going into it was God exists because God gave us reason. But as what's going to happen afterwards is that argument's going to go away in the sense of, do we know God gave us reason? No. All we know is we have reason. So does God exist? I don't really know. Maybe, maybe not. I can't really talk about it. In the same way we can talk about, are there ghosts? So, do you believe there are ghosts? Well, you know, unless we can prove there's ghosts, I can't really say there aren't ghosts, but I can't really say there are ghosts. So I just don't say anything about them. I can only talk about the things I can talk about. So only what can be sensed can be known. And what that eventually means is that only what can be sensed are the things that are important. The other stuff are like, things you do on the side. And just think about how a lot of people think about college, right? You go to college so that you can learn a skill, a trade. Do you go to college, I don't know, a lot of people will look at college like the humanities that many of you guys are doing, and you say, those are cool things to do on the side. Maybe they round you out a little bit. But honestly, literature, schmidterature. I mean, it's something you do for fun. It's not something that makes the world a better place per se. Like, for example, if I become a doctor and I learn how to heal, I mean, who's going to be valued more? The doctor who can heal or the author who can write good literature? I mean, yeah. So, yeah. So that's one element of the Enlightenment. Another element is this idea of progress that we talked about. And progress is largely this understanding or gaining control over the things we don't know. So it is statistics. It is trying to sort of label stuff, measure it, and therefore we know how we can affect those things. And what are the good effects of the Enlightenment? The good effects of the Enlightenment are these things like, again, progress. Is that this, in general, if I just said that to you, that seems like a good thing. Understanding control of the unknown. Like, we want better crops next year. I want to understand how crops work. That just makes sense. Progress. Individual freedom. You have the ability to choose your own good life because you have use of your own reason. And so the more that we buy this argument, the more each individual gets to make their own choices. Now, as we just saw in that video about gig workers, here's the good thing about that, right? I get to choose where I want to work, when I want to work. If I've got money, I get to choose if I want DoorDash to bring me McDonald's or if I want to bring me, something better than McDonald's, Panda Express, or if it's going to bring me from that restaurant. These are all my choices. If you don't like what's happening on that video about the gig economy, theoretically, just don't work. Just don't work for Uber or don't work for I can't remember what it was called in that, something Lou, whatever the English version of that is. And that's individual freedom. That's fantastic. On the other hand, you also saw in that video that isn't everything great about that, but for now, we'll just say good effects. Another one is just the betterment of humanity, that essentially, a rising tide lifts all boats. The fact that we all have smartphones now changes who we are. Ideally, it changes it for the better. And we're all just using and applying our reason for better and better outcomes. Now what we're going to talk about next is we're going to talk about some not so great outcomes, not so great effects of the Enlightenment. The thing you're going to read and watch is this pair called Adorno and Horkheimer. And there's a whole sort of history behind this whole thing. But you're going to read just a little bit of it and you're going to watch this video. It's not easy to sort of understand and follow. So give it your best shot. Don't just sort of have that going in the background while you're doing other things. Actually sit and try to follow the logic of the argument and try and understand what it's trying to say about this Enlightenment that we studied and how they're going to argue it leads to a lot of the horrors of the 20th century and a lot of the things that are problematic today, and that they would argue are even sort of outrank some of the good stuff, the betterment stuff we get. We get a lot of really crappy stuff from this as well, in how we treat each other, how we see each other, how human beings interact with each other. All right, take a look at that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about Horkheimer and Adorno.